Early childhood educators will encounter children of all types throughout the course of their career and of all developmental levels. Inevitably, educators will also teach children whose behaviors may be more challenging than others. Over the next few minutes, we will explore how educators can manage challenging behaviors in the classroom. To begin, we will look at the underlying factors that may prompt certain behaviors in children. Next, we will explore how families can be allies in transforming undesirable behaviors into positive ones. And finally, we will examine various behavior management strategies from which children, families, and educators may all benefit. Have you ever heard someone say, "That boy is a bad child"? When we think about challenging behaviors, we have to remember that the child is not bad. It's the behavior itself that's undesirable. And that's why it's so important to understand why a child may be exhibiting a particular behavior that we qualify as being unacceptable in an early learning setting. Generally, a child's behavior correlates to their level of development, and often an undesirable behavior is a very good indication that a child has not yet developed a particular set of skills for what he or she is trying to accomplish. And that's why it's so important to understand the function of the behavior. Before we try to change the behavior, we have to understand why it's happening. For example, a child may hit or kick, bite, shout, or cry if he or she hasn't yet developed the verbal skills necessary to express that they want a particular toy. So once we understand why a child has that particular behavior, then it's up to the educator to develop and implement into their curriculum activities that will help the child develop that specific set of skills. According to Children's Integration Support Services, behaviors are often directly correlated to the environment. The early learning environment encompasses everything from the physical layout of the space to the toys that the children play with on a daily basis, and even the people with whom they interact. So understanding the function of a behavior can tell us a lot about the environment. We have to ask ourselves when observing a child, is the environment too open? Is it conducive to learning? Is it too disorganized? Also, are the toys developmentally appropriate? Educators also have to examine the relationship that they have with the children in their program. Have they taken the time to establish a trusting relationship with each child in the class? Do they engage in active listening with the children? Active listening is a crucial part of an educator's duties with the children as much as it is with the parents, which brings me to my second point. Families will be an essential resource in behavior management. So it's important to create a trusting relationship with them as well. Often, educators tend to forget that families have their own cultural, social, or religious values that may not match their own. Think about the way that you were raised and the way that your childhood best friend was raised. There are most likely quite a few differences between your two families, but you still respected those differences. So educators always have to remember that even behavioral expectations may vary from family to family. And often, simply by communicating with families at drop-off or at pickup times, we are able to gather a lot of information from families without prying, by maintaining our respectful and professional boundaries with the families. Communication isn't only a way to gather good information about the families, it also shows them that you take your job to heart and that you strive to work closely with them to benefit their children. Once you've built a trusting relationship with them, it will be much easier to work collaboratively to explore and implement different behavior management strategies, and hopefully you will have their support along the way. Finally, we will explore ways in which educators can transform challenging behaviors into positive ones. And throughout this process, educators should share strategies and progress or regression, if it were to happen, with families. Often, families may have hints or tips that may facilitate the change. If the behavior is directly related to the environment, then it's simply up to the educator to make those necessary changes. This could include changing the physical layout of the space, or finding developmentally appropriate toys, or even incorporating more physical activity into the program. Educators must work together and use a consistent positive approach. This means that they must state directions and set limits in a way that tells children what they can do instead of what they can't do. According to the government of British Columbia, when caregivers offer positive statements, they reinforce for children what is acceptable. They serve as positive role models and decrease the likelihood for children to respond with defensiveness or resistance. Therefore, expectations must always be stated in a clear, positive manner, such as, "Walk in the classroom, please," or "Inside we use our soft voice, outside we can use our loud voice." Educators are role models, so by modeling appropriate behavior, we're enabling children to gain independence and to regulate their own emotions. In conclusion, managing challenging behaviors is a process. It will not happen overnight. It will likely take days, weeks, or even months. But by understanding the underlying factors that cause these behaviors, by communicating closely with families, and by exploring different strategies, educators will be able to transform these undesirable behaviors into positive ones.